Hey guys, this is Hard Time Strongman, and today we are going over Fieldcraft Fire. Our reference for today is ATP 3-50.21 Survival. And as a friendly reminder, always remain aware of the light, heat, sound, and smell signature a fire causes.
I'm excited. I love Fieldcraft. Fieldcraft is such a fun thing.
God, you're such a lover. You love everything.
Dude, it's so much fun. It is.
It's hard when we're having so much fun with the project. It's hard not to be excited.
Absolutely. So yeah. We're gonna learn you today. We're gonna teach you about the basics of fire, how to maintain your fire site, how to build the fire, the different ways you can actually build the fire, the different ways you can ignite a fire. So by the end of this, you're just gonna be able to know all of these things. You're going to be able to go into the field with confidence, knowing that you can build this.
Yeah. So our first Fieldcrafting episode that we talked about fire, that was a kit post, a consideration post. This, we're actually going to be going into the fieldcraft of fire.
Nitty gritty.
The nitty gritty, the itty bitty.
Itty bitty. All right. You can tell we're not awake folks, but it is what it is.
Hell, we'll get there. All right. So uses and benefits. So fire is used as, can be used as signaling. So via the light it produces or the smoke it produces. Think of Tom Hanks, Castaway.
Yeah.
It didn't work the first time, but it was worth a shot.
Yep. And the reason it's used as that is just because the properties of light. If you go out in the middle of the night and just start shining a flashlight around, you have a buddy pretty far away, chances are if there's nothing in between you, he's still going to be able to see that light, even out to I don't know, what would you say, a mile away, 2 miles away?
Oh, more, man. More. Yeah, light travels incredibly
easily.
Far.
Yeah.
We had the table in one of our situational awareness episodes.
Oh, yeah, we did.
But I think even Garantham in one of his videos was saying it was either a video or a podcast saying like a little signal mirror can push out to 10 miles. Just light transmission is dumb.
And of course, getting down to the nitty gritty details on it, different colors of light too can be seen from further away. Not that you really need to know that, but because most of what we're going to be talking about here is just going to be yellow light. So fire, actual campfire kind of stuff.
Yeah, it is important to know though.
Sure.
I mean, because at that point, I think it's photonic barriers. You can get into stuff like that. I know people read about that sort of stuff, but on a practical level, right? If you've gone out at night, say you're camping, right? And you have your campfire by your campsite. If you go off to, do whatever, take a wee and you come back, if someone is behind the fire that you're looking at night, you will not see them because there's a photonic barrier blocking your sight past the fire. People, you can nerd about all this all you want, but there are very real consequences that come into play with this sort of stuff.
Yeah,
not what we're going into today, but
nope,
they are there.
Yep, we're going into survival.
Yeah. So, historical example, I think it was Francis Marion. During the Revolutionary War, would actually use campfires to kind of fudge his numbers if he was facing an adversary at night. So he would have, a few choice men, say, like a team or a squad size element, and they would build campfires, obviously more than they needed, but it would give the perception that their number was greater than it actually was. Fire can be or is a sustained source of heat. So it reduces the amount of energy your body needs to keep warm. So especially in colder environments, staying warm, that costs calories. If you don't have to use as many calories, that's huge. We're talking about calories, time, water. If you can focus on other things than not freezing to death, that's a really big deal.
Yeah.
Obviously fire enables the, gold standard in water purification, boiling. It can dry clothing. It prevents, cold injuries like frostbite or hypothermia. Utilizing fire, you can use the coals to dig out structures, to make and hone tools. You can use, fire to repel mosquitoes, animals, predator, prey animals. You can sterilize medical equipment, and just on a more human level, it boosts morale.
Kumbaya.
Also,
Yep.
there's a lot to be said for a warm meal after a couple weeks in the suck.
Oh my God. I remember our first meal coming back from the field. That first field problem. Oh my God. That was heaven.
Nothing better.
It was crap, but it was heaven.
Nothing better, man. And, I shouldn't have to say this, but you always need to be aware that, a fire can cause damage to you and your equipment.
Right.
This is an incredible, incredible tool that you need to have that respect for.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. There was a time back when I was younger where we built a campfire out back at the farm. Had a bunch of people over, and somebody had said, keep in mind we were young, we were dumb. Somebody had said that if you throw a bulk can of baked beans on the fire without opening it, it will explode. So we're like, oh, cool. We got a bulk can of green beans from Sam's Club, or baked beans from Sam's Club, and toss it on the fire. Well, the fire wasn't hot enough. So after a while, the can of baked beans didn't explode, so we poured gasoline on it. Fire got really hot, didn't explode. So we had a friend who walked up to it, walked up with a stick, leaned over the fire, and poked it.
Oh, boy.
And the second he made contact with it, the can exploded. And outside the military, that was one of the biggest fireballs I've ever seen. Like, he disappeared into this, like, cloud of ash, dust, and fire. And the next thing I saw was him running away, partially on fire. We had him stop, drop, and roll in the back, put him out. He has blisters and scars to this day. It's not, like, horrible, but he got very, very lucky. Actually, if he would have been positioned, if he would have stepped into the fire pit, like 3 inches to his left, the can would have severed his leg. It shattered brick.
What a time to be alive.
It pulverized these bricks to dust. So you got to be very, very careful and not be stupid. Yes, it's fun to do stuff with fire.
Mm-hmm. Well, always had the respect for it. I have a story from when I was a kid, not as nearly dramatic as that, but we were all camping, me and my family, my extended family, and one of my cousins, this was the 90s, right? So she had one of those big poofy coats. I'm talking about like the neon pink ones. Looked like a Michelin Man. But she was waddling around in that, and we had a big roaring campfire because my dad and all the uncles were there, right? As you do. But she was playing around the campfire and she fell in.
Oh no.
And she fell in backwards.
Oh no.
And the only thing that saved her, because my dad and my uncles like reached in, ripped her out, ripped the coat off her before it can melt to her skin. Only thing that saved her was that she had her hood on. So the fire and the coals ate away the entire coat and the hood. Not a hair was burned on her head.
Wow.
Yeah.
Dude, that's so lucky. That could have turned out so much worse.
Yeah. I mean, scary stuff, right?
Right.
You have to have that respect there. But do you want to get into some, just some basics?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. So the basics of fire, it's very simple. You need these 3 things. We call it the fire triangle, or just a triangle, however you want to think about it. It's just 3 things. And if you have these 3 things in the correct ratio, you can have a fire.
You will have fire.
Yes. So the first thing you need is fuel. Non-gaseous state, because fuel can come in a gas, propane, kerosene, stuff like that. It doesn't burn directly. It's the actual vapors that come off of it that actually burn, catch fire. But you need fuel regardless. You need heat. So you need a spark. You need some kind of heat to ignite that fuel when it produces the gas. And you need oxygen. That is the final key component to the fire triangle. So the gas from the fuel, when it combines with the oxygen in the air, it burns at a pretty sustained rate as long as there is fuel and as long as there is oxygen. As long as you have those two things, the fire will continue to burn. If any of those sides of the triangle are removed, the fire will go out. You remove the fuel, fire goes out. You remove the heat, fire goes out. And obviously, if you remove the oxygen, as you probably learned when you were younger, putting out a fire, remove the oxygen, that fire goes out on the spot.
Preparing a fire site, you want to make sure that your fire is built on flat, dry ground. You need to have it protected from the wind, whether that's from a wind stopper like a log, or protecting it with your body as you're tending to a new fire. Mm-hmm. If possible, it's good to have the fuel supply near you, so you're not having to expend those calories, expend that time to gather that fuel to sustain your fire.
You don't want to be cutting down a tree or cutting up a limb.
Right. You want to make sure that around a meter, around a yard, is cleared around your fire site to protect it from spreading across the ground. Right.
That means clearing away any dry, dead debris.
Yeah. Any stray kindling or whatever, pine needles, leaves, dried grass, clearing away all that, because it is so quick. Wildfires, it can, if you're not paying attention, it can get out of hand very quickly.
Extremely quickly.
Another thing, porous rock. So kind of like spongy type rock should be removed from the area as well. So that porous rock can actually store water inside of it. And when that's superheated, that can explode.
That's actually a really good point. I didn't really think of that.
Yeah. And another thing having to do with your site, a fire reflector. So fire reflector, that could be a large stone, that could be a green tree or a mossy dead tree, anything that reflects the heat back at you. So that maximizes the heat produced by your fire by directing and protecting the heat from being redirected by the wind or just radiating away. Like I said, it can be non-porous rock, it can be stacked logs, a sheet of metal, whatever you have available.
I would definitely say that if you're doing stacked logs, make sure that they are recently felled logs. Mm-hmm. So green. What we call green. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh man, I think a really good example of that was what episode was that? Like a season finale of Alone where they were in Alaska.
You know what I'm talking about? Was that season 7?
I think 7 or 8. It was with that. I think it was like a SEER instructor or a sniper instructor. The guy we really liked who, built his shelter around, that huge rock. Mm-hmm. Made the chimney and everything.
His fireplace. Yeah.
Right. So, entire half of his shelter acted as a heat reflector.
Yeah.
All right. And then with fire building, the base of your fire, where you're actually building your fire on, should be, or, optimally would be a non-porous rock or a flat piece of wood. And that's just to keep your tinder and kindling off of, the ground if it's potentially wet, or could, displace. And brace. So brace, good benchmark for that, about the width of your forearm. And that's laid across the base to help control the oxygen of the fire, the kindling, and the fuel being worked. You can think of it as like a wall. It's just an extra hand to help you build the fire up off of. Helps protect from the wind, like I said. Helps so you can build up off of with the kindling and get hot enough to where you can start using fuel.
And that kind of brings a point to mind that we didn't really cover, and it's the fire triangle is a very delicate thing, where if you have too much of something, the fire will not sustain. Like if you have too much oxygen, say wind, it will douse that fire. If you have too much fuel, it will still douse that fire. And if you have too much, not too much heat. That's the one thing you can never really have too much of is heat. If you have too much heat, it's gonna burn through the fuel and oxygen pretty quickly, so your fire is going to go out anyway. But you can never have too much heat when you're starting a fire.
Right. And, we say the fire triangle because the sides of the triangle need to be equal. They need to be in balance.
Yes. Yep.
Otherwise, the triangle will fail.
Right.
You want to go into yeah, go for it.
Yeah. So that brings us to the 3 phases of the actual fuel itself. The first phase is your tinder. This is usually a very dry material made up of like fibers, or it can have some kind of petroleum-based fuel infused into it. It can be ignited by just a small spark, coal, a flame, electrical current, what have you. Damp tinder, it can be a killer. I don't know how many times I've watched a movie or a TV show or even alone and seen people trying to light fires with damp tinder, and it will not light. You have to have an incredible amount of heat. You're not even igniting it. You're drying it out at that point. Yeah. You're essentially just drying it out, evaporating the moisture that's in it to allow it to ignite. So if you have damp tinder, you can keep this between layers of your clothing, either on your body or off, particularly off. But you can do it on there because the heat from your body will help dry it out.
Something else you can do is if you have like, dried grass that is damp, you can, if you're can ensure that it won't get blown away by the wind, you can lay it out on like a dark rock or something where it's going to catch all that, all the rays of the sun and dry out faster.
Yep.
Or if you need to collect dry tinder, easy way if you're, say you're walking through dry grass, just kind of splay your fingers out, kind of like a claw, and walk through the grass, and that will naturally catch any dried grass. Makes it a little faster to in the collection process.
Right. And some of the many kinds of tinder that you should be looking for would be bark, dead dry grass, down. So you're talking feathers, wood shavings, paper, steel wool,
pine needles.
Steel wool's a good one. I actually didn't even think of that one.
Great thing about steel wool, besides catching a spark from like a match or what I'm trying to say, or like a ferro rod, you can actually use batteries. So like a 9-volt battery, you touch the two ends together.
Yeah, and that's right.
And that'll create a spark.
That's a good one. Yeah. Also, one thing you can use is the gunpowder from your ammo. Like, a lot of people don't think of that. I mean, it's kind of a catch-22 because a lot of times people don't want to save their ammo for survival purposes, for hunting, what have you.
Well, and it will burn very, very quickly.
Oh, yeah. So you can just remove the actual round itself from the casing and pour your gunpowder out and ignite that. You can also use fuel tabs. So that brings us into the second phase. The tinder needs to catch something on fire. So that's where you get into the second phase, which is kindling. This is added to the tinder when it's burning. I recommend at least having the tinder burning a lot stronger than just, like, hey, there's an ember on it. Let's go ahead and just dump a bunch of fuel on it kind of thing.
And a good benchmark for tinder, like for getting all that together, you should be able to have enough to hold in 2 hands.
Yes.
That would ensure that you have enough tinder to burn long enough to catch your kindling on fire and you can build up.
So the purpose of the kindling is just to increase the size of the fire, and it creates the initial coal base. When you get to the kindling phase, this is where your survival knife, your hatchet, your axe, your tomahawk tends to come into play. You can use it to produce just copious amounts of kindling. You're going to be doing this by processing large pieces of wood. So you fell a tree, you cut it down on logs. From there, you need to start like splintering it. Like that's about the size and consistency that you need.
Well, and this is why we harp on, right? And this is why we harp on, keeping all of your blades sharp, right? So the idea with kindling, you're, trying to make it as small as possible initially, like almost to the size of your tinder, and then, building up and up and up. So in the processing, you, like you said, you fell a tree, you fell a branch, you cut that up into rounds, you quarter it, and you go smaller and smaller and smaller. And if you get your blade sharp enough, you don't even have to swing it anymore. You can just run the blade down the length of the wood, and you can make shavings off of that, in bulk. like you said, that's where that's where your axe, your tomahawk, your knife comes into play. That's where your time commitment comes into play. If you do the legwork up front, then you're going to have a higher rate of success with your fires.
Yeah. So some of the kindling you need to be looking for and can use are going to be small twigs, wood shavings, small branches, small sticks. It's common sense. You build up in size. You want to start small with your kindling or your tinder,
and you
move
need
up in size with.
Sorry,
go ahead.
Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. Yeah, you want to build up in size, but with all of this kindling, you need to ensure that it's dry.
Yes.
Because you can rip a branch off of a tree, break it up. You can't call that kindling.
No.
You know what I mean?
No.
You would have to have an established fire in order to dry the wood and then burn it. So, you're looking for that crack when you go to break a limb. But
you don't need a bend. You need a crack.
Yeah.
A bend just means that it's very, very wet and still alive.
Right. I didn't mean to step on you. I just wanted to, push. We're looking for dry.
Right. No, you're good. You're good. It's helpful to clarify. Sometimes people, if they're new to this, they don't know. So
right.
It helps to always specify. I know like some of our more seasoned guys are just
rolling
they're
their
like,
eyes.
oh yeah, we knew that, but hey guys, this ain't for you.
Respectfully.
Respectfully, yes. This ain't for you. So that leads us to fuel. This is your bigger stuff. This is what's actually going to be your actual fire. The wood you use as fuel should be about the diameter of your forearm at the minimum. This wood fuel does not need to be kept dry to burn. It's helpful that it does, but it will do more of a smolder if it's not dry. It'll still produce a fire. It'll still eventually burn, but it'll just take longer to ignite. This all depends on the heat of the fire too, because if you have a really hot fire, it's not really going to matter too much because it will evaporate that water that's in there and it will catch fire pretty quickly. The kind of fuel that you need to be looking for is dead wood. Dead wood is the best kind of fuel because it will catch very, very quickly. You need to be looking for dead grass, twist them into bunches, tie them together. That's good fuel. One that you pointed out to me earlier, actually before show, was dried animal dung. I didn't even think of this, but a lot of the dung you're going to find out there is going to be plant-based animal dung. A lot of like vegetarian animals.
Yeah, think like cow pies.
Yeah, cow pies. Like deer are going to eat grass, rabbits eat grass, so like their dung is going to be laced with undigested plant material, and that will be dry, especially if it's not fresh dung. I should probably point that out. It's just not fresh dung.
Also like a sanitation hazard.
Yeah.
Don't be digging in fresh dung.
Yeah. Don't be playing with poop. We ain't kids.
Quit playing with poop.
Yep. Also, any kind of fuel source like gas, so oil, diesel, gas, other fuels, when mixed with sand, it will slow their burn rate and prolong their burn time, which that's really what you want with your fire is burn time, because your fire can burn really hot, but if it's going out, if you're burning through your fuel really quickly, that's not very helpful.
Right.
Because obviously if you're building a fire, you want it to last. So
something else that you can use. Yeah, something else you can use with gasoline instead of sand is styrofoam. So fire lays or fire structures. So a teepee. So this is the stereotypical fire lay. You're shaping your sticks like a teepee or like a cone. As the structure burns, outside logs fall inward, thus feeding the fire. And just a note for this type of fire lay, it burns well with wet wood.
Yes. Yeah, this is the fire structure that you want to go for when you have wet fuel, wet wood, because it will dry it out in mass, because all the logs are catching the fuel at the same time. So even if all the logs are wet, they're going to burn and they're going to evaporate the fuel. The fire is going to evaporate all the water in it, and it's going to dry it out, and it's just going to. There you go. Yeah. Bob's your uncle.
Right. Nice part about this too is in practice it makes a really thick bed of coals in the center, because all those all the sticks falling into the center just feeds it on and on and on. And then if you need to step away for a while, that crust can build over. You can open it up again, and you'll still have coals there.
So the same principle. I don't think you've got it listed here, but one of the one of the fire structures that I've seen is where you can take 4 thick sticks and dig them or place them into the ground at an angle. And then in the center, you put your kindling, and then you pile your logs, your wood, up those sticks that are at an angle. So as the center burns and it burns out, the rest of the wood
it's self-feeding.
Pushes down, so it self-feeds.
I have not seen that before. That's interesting.
Yeah.
Huh. All right, lean-to. So the lean-to is a little more involved. You're, like you said, you can push a stick into the ground at an angle. This specifically, you're facing the wind. Then you're placing your tinder deep underneath that stick, so as far back as you can. Then you're stacking kindling on either side. You're stacking up to kind of create a tunnel, if you will. You light the tinder, and then as the tinder lights the kindling, you add more kindling and fuel to that structure. And the reason why this works is because that green stick that you drove into the ground. So you try that with with a dry stick, that's going to burn along with all of your kindling.
Yep.
So the stick being green, having that moisture in there is buying your time.
And the interesting thing also this came to mind about doing structures like this, and I see a couple of others in here. When you put the fire deep inside of a structure, what it's doing is, yes, it will burn the oxygen within there, but what it's also doing is creating a vacuum when it does that, and it's pulling oxygen in. So that will increase the actual temperature of the heat, the fire inside of there, and it's going to burn hotter because it's sucking all that oxygen in and basically creating a little mini tornado.
Yeah.
And that's where you get like fire tornadoes, that kind of principle.
A mini firestorm.
Oxygen in. Yep.
Yeah. And you can get into like the cross stitch and the pyramid, but I just want to say, like, with these structures, it's important to learn these because this gives you a framework. After you establish this, after you establish a log cabin or lean-to, when you're tending to the fire, when you're feeding the fire, it gives you something to build up off of. You're not having to restart every time, or you're not risking throwing the triangle out of whack.
Right. Because rebuilding your structure midway through a fire is a pain, and it is dangerous. Mm-hmm. So let's get into the cross stitch here. The cross stitch is dug out in the shape of an X. It's probably about a foot long by 3 inches deep. The tinder is placed in the middle of the cross. The kindling pyramid is built above the tinder, and the shallow ditch allows air to flow underneath the tinder to provide a draft, which is basically what we're talking about. It's sucking oxygen in, and it's creating a higher temperature within there to help burn.
Right.
It's definitely a great structure. That's one that I haven't used, but I can see.
I also
how
learned
it would
about
be,
it, in the research phase, and what I like about it is having, that shallow trench makes it so that you can't smother your tinder, which I thought was really neat.
That's a good point. Yeah, you wouldn't be cutting the oxygen off to the tinder.
Right. By the time that the kindling falls down, you've already created a bed of coals.
Ah, yes, that's nice.
Yeah.
So the next one is probably one of my personal favorites. One I usually like to go with is the pyramid. So it's layers of parallel branches or logs that are stacked on each other. They're laid perpendicular to each other, the smaller and smaller than the previous layer. So it's hence why you get the pyramid shape, because eventually they just get closer and closer together towards the top. So the fire starter is built on the top of it so that it just burns from the top down, thus creating a longer life for your pyramid, for your fire structure. This requires almost no care during the night. It's very similar to the one that I mentioned earlier, where the logs were built up at an angle, so basically an inverse pyramid. But you don't need all the sides to it; you just need two. And this allows for the fire to burn at its own rate, and as long as it has fuel, you don't have to mess with it at all.
Yeah, both those are really interesting. I've never played with a fire like that, but that would be nice to not have to worry about it at night.
There's one more I'm looking for. I think it's called like a Norwegian fire log or Finnish fire log.
Where you split it, then you stuff your tinder inside, right?
So technically, yes. What you do is you don't split it all the way. You cut off pretty big section, however much you want.
Okay.
And then you drill a hole straight into the middle, and then you cut down at like angles all the way around so that it burns from the inside out. It smolders on the inside, but then the fire
Seeps out the side.
evenly out the side.
That's cool.
It's a very good one.
Yeah. Well, and there was one other one. Is it like called a Dakota or a Dakota fire? It's the one where you like dig a hole underneath it, like a little tunnel. There's no smoke.
Ventilation one. Yeah.
Yeah. There's no smoke. It burns super hot.
Mm-hmm. I don't know what that one's called, but I know which one you're talking about.
Yeah.
Same principle as the cross stitch.
Right. And then the last one that we mentioned today is the log cabin. That's one that I use most often besides the TP. You're just stacking layers and layers and layers of sticks that you've laid perpendicularly, so against the grain on each other. And this creates a lot of light and heat, and also creates a large bed of coals. In practice, it's a good lay for cooking or for signaling purposes. And we talked about this in our first Fieldcraft episode with our just considerations, but we'll start with matches. So we recommend storm matches or waterproof matches. Those come in waterproof container. They have treating to the match head itself, so they can be, a lot of them, they can be struck on multiple surfaces, and they're wind and water resistant. Lighters, Bic lighters, Zippo lighters. I'd recommend the Bic just because they're super cheap. They last a long time. Something with the Zippo, that's a lot of upkeep. That's more of a novelty item, because that fuel can evaporate and tends to evaporate very quickly. So It doesn't really meet the grade for field work. You showed me something really cool in the pre-show, that little plasma lighter.
Oh yeah,
little electric lighter. So what did you say that was again? God, it's a horrible sound.
Isn't it though? So it's a USB charged. So I mean it's completely renewable. As far as the fuel goes, it's basically just the same principle as a spark plug. Mm-hmm. So when an electrical current runs through it, the current jumps between two metal pieces and creates a spark. And it's windproof. I don't know if it's waterproof. I haven't really stuck this sucker in water, but with electrical current, that's probably one of the last things that I want to do.
No, go ahead and do it. Let's see what happens.
No, I'm good. I'm good on that one. I'll allow you to do it though. That's for sure. Yeah, no, it's great. We use it around the house to light all of our candles.
So I want to head this off because I can. Go ahead.
It's better than buying those freaking like huge, long, big campfire lighters.
Yeah, miserable.
Because the fuel runs out on those. This year, I can plug this into a wall socket and it'll recharge.
Yeah, and I want to head this off before because I can already hear the criticism about the it being USB powered.
Mm-hmm.
We have solar chargers now.
Yeah.
So if you wanted to use this in the field, for an extended period of time, you could bring a solar charger. You said that USB rechargeable.
Mm-hmm.
You're good to go.
Absolutely. Just plug it in and plug and play.
And away you go. Another one, metal matches, ferro rods. So
yes.
These need to be protected from other metals because they can be brittle. But if you get your practice in, get your hours in, these can potentially start thousands of fires. The one that...
They're so easy too.
Yeah, the one that you give to me, it's so the little ferro rod, but then it also has the striker that hugs the hugs the cylinder, so it comes down really compact. But I don't even know how many times I've trained with that, and it's barely scratched the paint off. So they last a ridiculous amount of time.
Right, and those are the same principle as what has been used for thousands of years is a piece of flint and a piece of metal. You rub them together, you strike them together, and it creates sparks.
So rocks that are in the flint family: quartz, chert, obsidian, agate, jasper. The rock needs to be harder than steel.
Mm-hmm.
And then you're striking the flint or the rock against a piece of carbon steel to create that spark.
Right.
So the more breakage that you have, the more sparks, higher chance of success.
Also, some of the things that you can use. I mean, you mentioned electric plasma lighters, road flares. Road flares are such a slept-on thing. It's mainly because you light them. They're one-time use. You light them, they burn out.
They last a long time, though.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. You can light that sucker, throw it into the fire itself, and it will catch something. It burns at a high temperature. Another thing that you used that you mentioned earlier when we were talking about kindling or tinder was batteries. You can use batteries together with, you can use steel wool, but you can use other sources. Use a battery as long as the two ends or wherever your positive and negative are, as long as they create a circuit, they will cause electricity to flow and it will create a spark. Mm-hmm. It will create a current. It will create heat and it will catch something on fire.
So a good application for this is your car battery and jumper cables. So everyone, I say everyone, probably not everyone's as stupid as I am, but if you ever connected, your jumper cables to your battery and then touch the other two ends, you're creating a spark. So by that same principle, so you don't necessarily need anything extra, but if you have those jumper cables, you can go into your tinder, spark, break that circuit a couple of times, shoot those sparks out, and away you go. I did want to add on the road flares, obviously they are designed for signaling. Obviously they're designed to be as bright and last as long as possible. So that needs to be a consideration for whatever you're trying to do.
If you're in a denied environment, in a hostile environment, road flare would probably be one of the last things that I would want to use. Just because, if you've ever seen Jurassic Park, if you've ever seen somebody sitting on the side of the road, you see these things lit. They put off a tremendous amount of light. Granted, they are red. They put off light in the red spectrum, but still, you can see those things a long way away.
Right.
So keep that in mind.
You mentioned in a couple other episodes the like using a lens, like convex lens, like glasses or binoculars or rifle scope.
Hang on, before we get into that.
Yeah, sir.
So one of the things you keep in mind, if you're looking for road flares or batteries, check vehicles, check aircraft, check electronic equipment. You can find batteries in most of these. Road flares, obviously, you're not going to find it in electrical equipment, but, use your brain on this one. 2 insulated wires are really all that you need with a battery to utilize the method of the battery. The road flare, just light it, stick it in there, and walk away kind of thing. It's set it, forget it. But with the wires, you got to connect one to the positive terminal, one to the negative terminal, like we said. And like you said, once they touch together or touch some fuel, it's gonna create that. It's gonna close that circuit, and you're gonna get a fire. A short in this wire will cause a spark. I think you mentioned this.
Yeah.
Am I being retarded?
No, you just mentioned it too.
Okay.
It's the principle.
Okay. So yeah. Those are the easy methods. The other ones that kind of take a little bit of patience. Get into those a little bit.
I did also want to put a disclaimer that Hard Time Strongmen does not endorse shocking yourselves. So methods that are a little more involved, utilizing a convex lens. So eyeglasses, binoculars, a camera lens. Those focus
magnifying glass.
Right. Those focus the sun's rays on a singular point. You do have to play with the depth that you're holding that lens at and the angle. But give enough time and focus, the sun's rays will provide the heat that you need to light kindling on fire. First method we'll talk about is the fire plow. If anyone's watched Castaway, this is the method that Tom Hanks used in that role. This is based off friction. So what you need to do is you need to cut a straight groove into a base made of soft wood. Then you're plowing the blunt tip of a hardwood rod up and down that groove. So this action wears off and pushes out small wood fibers, and the friction from you digging that rod up and down that softwood base ignites those wood fibers. So this is a big calorie dump. So it's not the best way to do it, but the principle remains the same.
And keep in mind that these methods that we're talking about are going to require a lot of time, a lot of energy, a lot of calories. So I would not recommend these as your first attempt at making fire. These are going to be like your kind of...
These are your last ditch efforts. So we're pulling this information from the Army's field manual on survival. So this is more geared towards isolated persons. So isolated pilots, people that are held behind enemy lines, people that need to do this to survive. So we've always been, and we'll continue to push, having contingencies, building in redundancies in your kit, in your planning, in everything, so that hopefully you can negate getting to this point.
Right. This is beyond like your primary, secondary, and tertiary methods of creating fire. This is like you said, kind of a last ditch effort kind of thing, where it's just like, well, crap, I don't have my ferro rod. Crap, I don't have a lighter.
Exactly, and that's why that's why we're teaching it, is to one, to give you that skill set, but also we're still in our level 1 kind of skill set. So we're these are the principles, these are the basics of creating fire. So we're trying to teach you these principles so that you can apply them to your situation and what you have.
And I will state this is stuff that we were not taught in the Army. This is stuff that, because, I mean, we never got taught how to create a fire in the Army. That was one thing that we stayed away from. Because it's like, you had vehicles, like survival classes were few and far between in the Army. We have gone out of our way over the years to learn these things and practice these methods so that we can bring them to you. Because this is stuff that's not usually taught. These methods are, you would only find these in like survival classes.
Well, right. So the Army, has a logistics base, has this, this mass that you will not have, that you do not have. So as an infantryman, I didn't have to worry about where my next meal was coming from. I knew that eventually I would get fed.
Yeah,
whether that
those
was
MREs are coming.
Yeah, whether that was a hot meal, whether that was MREs, whether the CO was out ordering pizza, or we would get a meal from an Afghani. Like,
the gut truck was coming.
Yeah, like I knew that I would get food. Like, that was never a concern for me. But without having that logistics base, without having all those
line.
Yeah, the supply line, all those all those cohesive units working together, right? You're on your own. That's a concern now. That's something that you have to, constantly be thinking about
and planning for sure.
Oh, yeah, exactly. I mean, the fact of the matter is, you will never stockpile enough.
Yeah.
You cannot stockpile enough. You cannot stockpile enough food. You cannot stockpile enough water, enough ammunition, enough equipment. You need to be able to source these things.
Be a squirrel. Cache that stuff.
But also
just don't forget where you buried your nuts.
But have a plan for being able to resupply that outside of your caches, because you won't be able to cache enough.
Right.
You need to be able to source this stuff yourself.
Right. So the next one we had here was the bow and drill. This is one that I'm actually very familiar with. This is one that I've seen a lot of, especially on survival shows, is the bow and drill. The fire plow is, in my opinion, the fire plow is a very inefficient method. It, like you said, it just involves like literally dragging a stick or pushing a stick along another stick and hoping to God that you create enough little tiny wood fibers and maybe some heat to ignite those.
Well, it's a huge calorie dump. It is a lot of effort.
Yeah, I do not recommend that one at all. Any of these I don't recommend. These are, like we said, last ditch efforts. But the bow and drill, so this requires a piece of stone, 2 pieces of wood and a string. You need a socket. So this is a stone with a depression in one side. It could even be a piece of wood, but you're gonna need a drill. So this is gonna be a straight, seasoned piece of wood that's gonna be used to create friction on the fireboard or the stone, whatever. The socket itself, I forgot to mention this, is just it's gonna hold the drill in place as it's actually rotated.
So it's going to hold the top end of the stick. So you're pushing down while you're rotating the stick, and that's what makes it so it doesn't rip up your hand.
Like I said, it holds the drill in place while it's getting rotated. So that your drill is just basically a straight seasoned piece of wood. It's going to be used to create friction on the fireboard itself. This is what's actually going to be rotating. Your fireboard is just it's a piece of softwood. We should probably specify the difference between softwood and hardwood, because it does make a difference, especially with, at least in my mind, with building. But it makes a difference with fire as well. So your softwoods are going to be woods that are easily malleable, easily like broken apart, drilled into in this case. Your hardwoods are ones that you want to, when you build structures, like these are the ones that people use as framework on houses. This is going to be stuff that you use as the actual like framework on your shelters if you build them. So you don't want those. Those are going to be hard. Those are going to be like, those don't break as easily. Those don't like fall apart like softwood does. Softwood doesn't necessarily fall apart, but you can cause it to break apart very easily.
It's a lot more fibrous.
Yes. Thank you. So also after that, you need a fire pan, which is going to be a thin, flat piece of wood, or leather or other sturdy material. It's going to be used to catch whatever embers are made by the fireboard, and then you're going to transfer them to a fire bundle. So you're not using this drill in the actual fire itself, in the place like right on top of where you're going to be making this. You're basically just creating embers. You're creating tinder.
Coals.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Thank you. And then you're going to be transferring those to where your fire is. So the last thing you need for this is a bow. So this is going to be a flexible stick, but it's going to be strong so that it can hold its shape while you're doing this, because this is going to be a very tedious thing. So it's going to be flexible enough to bend like a hunting bow, but not flexible enough to where it will not hold its shape. So what you do is you end up taking the bowstring and you tie it from one end of the bow to the other, like you would with a bow and arrow.
Right.
But then when you do this, you loop it in the middle and loop it around your drill. But it needs to be tight, just because of the amount you're going to be bowing back and forth like you would see like a violinist do.
There needs to be enough purchase from the string to the drill itself to where it rotates with that string. And
exactly.
That bowstring, that could be a strip of leather, of clothing. You could make rope. It could be 550 cord, whatever you have on hand. A shoestring. Yeah, whatever you have on hand. But like you said, it needs to be taut. It needs to be taut between the two ends of the bow, and then you have to have that loop over that drill.
Right, exactly. And so when you end up moving that bow back and forth, it's going to cause the drill itself to have a twisting motion. And when you do this, you put it all together. You're pushing down with the socket. You're pushing it down to the fireboard. The drill moving back and forth, rotating, or not the bow moving back and forth, rotating the drill. You're going to create heat. You need to have some tinder right there, so that when you do create these embers, you can just push them into them and then transfer them to the fire. Because, man, it's such a drawn out process. It's the same principle as a lighter. You're basically making an old fashioned lighter with this. It's a pain in the butt. It requires a lot of calories.
So, something we should have said at the beginning. So the fireboard, what you're actually drilling onto. So prep work for that beforehand, you need to cut out a little divot where your drill is going to sit into. And then on the opposite end of that board, you'll cut a slit. So basically that allows the wood fibers that you are sloughing off, that you're drilling off, to fall into that funnel and make that little pile of coals.
Right.
And that's where your, I think it's like the plank you said, where it catches all the coals onto. So it works in a system, but you can't just start drilling onto a flat piece of board. You have to do that work beforehand.
Right. Make it easier on yourself.
Right.
Because if you have a flat piece of board, that when you start drilling, it's not going to stay in one place, and it's not going to do what you need it to do. So do a little bit of work beforehand, whether it's whittling out with a knife or an axe or a tomahawk, whatever. Get that
stone,
little divot. Yes, exactly. Yeah.
And then the last one that we wanted to mention, not nearly as efficient as using a bow and drill, but it's a hand drill. So it's the same concept, the same principles as a bow and drill, but instead of using a bow to rotate your drill, you're using your hands. So that's where you're actually rubbing, where you said rubbing two sticks together. That's essentially the action. So you're rotating the stick by moving your hands over and past each other down the length of the drill, and then doing it again.
I hate this.
And again until you get that bed of coals. Once again, a huge calorie dump. But
I hate this method so much.
Hate it or not, you might have to do it.
I know. The hand drill and the fire plow are two of the most inefficient and calorie dumping wastes of time that I've ever known. I hate them both, and I do not recommend ever doing them.
But that's because that's because you've had the the equipment or whatever before now that you didn't have to use them before.
I will find a way to do a bow and drill. I will not. I refuse to allow myself to be put in a situation where I have to use the fire plow or the freaking hand drill. They are so inefficient. They are. It makes me angry just thinking about having to do them.
6 on.
I will do them, but I will not be happy about having to do them.
6, season 12 of Alone with nothing. Well, you know what? I guess I'm not gonna have a fire then if I can't make a bow and drill.
I guess I'll die.
Yeah, guess I'll die.
I would be so angry. Oh, I would not be able to be put on television.
Now that your anger is red hot, this was fire, guys. We wanted to the irony. We wanted to give you the principles of fire building and just different considerations for when you're making a fire in the field. This is obviously a huge tool. This is life. If you don't have, if you are in a situation where you do not have that, that grace of shelter or anything else, you will need fire to survive. So being able to use it effectively, being able to, understand the principles of the how and why fire works the way it does, gives you the tools to be able to apply it to other tasks, to other things.
Sometimes it pays to be a nerd.
Yeah.
It does.
Yeah. So key takeaways, guys: the fire triangle: heat, oxygen, and fuel. Protect your fire from wind. Be mindful that, while a really great tool, fire needs to be respected because it will absolutely destroy you and your equipment. Sex, anything else?
Be mindful of your caloric outputs, your caloric drains, because you need to plan very, very carefully when you're doing these things. Not so much when you have, the easy way of starting fires, but if you have to manually start a fire, you need to keep that in mind.
100%. All right, guys. Thanks for joining us. This was Fire.
Like, share, subscribe. Thank you all for your support. We'll see y'all next time.
Stay in the fight.